Welcome to the Coventry and Warwickshire Green Business Programme podcast. Subscribe now for more episodes.
Hello, welcome to the Green Business Programme podcast. The nature all around us is precious and benefits from a helping hand. In this podcast, we're joined by Middlemarch Environmental, a UK-wide wildlife trust consultancy, and we're going to talk about what local businesses can do to protect the nature in Coventry and Warwickshire. I'm John Bates, and our guest is James Calow, Senior Ecologist at Middlemarch Environmental, and he's on the line now. Hi, James. Thanks very much for being a guest on the podcast.
Hi, John. It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you.
No problem. Just give us a bit of an overview, if you would, about Middlemarch and what the history is and what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, so basically, Middlemarch is a wholly owned subsidiary of Warwickshire Wildlife Trust. Warwickshire Wildlife Trust is a charity that promotes nature conservation within Warwickshire. And it was set up back in the 70s. People might know its headquarters. It's based in Brandon Marsh, just outside Coventry. It's a big wetland nature reserve complex that they've got there. And one of the interesting things about Brandon Marsh is that it's actually a former sand and gravel extraction work. So it was actually owned by a business, which then, when they moved away from the sand and gravel extraction, has actually filled up with water and created a fantastic wetland nature reserve. So it's a very good example of how businesses can help biodiversity. And Brandon Marsh now is a special site of scientific interest. So going from, a business operation to a triple SI is a fantastic success story for business. Where Middlemarch fits into that is that we are the consultancy arm of the charity. So we were set up in the early 90s, about 1991, basically just as a group to help provide a bit of income for the trust, to give them a bit of extra money that they could spend on local nature conservation projects. Now, from the 90s to around now, the business has grown quite substantially. So it's gone from, as I say, just a small group of people that were based at Brandon to, an independent company. We're a registered company. We've got our own office in Meriden now, and we're a medium-sized organisation. We employ over 100 people and have a turnover of about £5 million. So 10% of that turnover every year goes to the trust to support nature conservation projects. So we give them about £500,000 a year, which for a local conservation charity is quite a significant sum of money. So yeah, it's a real local success story for nature conservation for us and the trust.
Great efforts and a great story. Now you're a senior ecologist, and presumably that's more than just a feature of age.
Yes, it is. It's a good question. What do I actually do? And I think the key thing is we, as a trust, we look at two things really. We look at supporting businesses and other organisations in terms of what they've got on their land holdings. So what kind of habitats they've got, whether it be kind of grassland areas, woodland areas, ponds and wetlands and things like that. Because a lot of companies say, if you think about people that generate power, like the utilities and companies like that, or even, like landfill sites or other businesses, they generally tend to have a bit of a land holding where they've got some grassland or maybe, some trees or hedgerows or a pond or something like that can actually, be managed for wildlife and conservation. So we do a lot of work in terms of surveying the habitats, seeing what they've got, facilitating development if they need to develop it. So look at, what they need to do to manage that effectively and build biodiversity back into the soft landscaping scheme.
So, sorry to interrupt you, but you say lots of projects, and just sort of reading on your website, you're talking about that you're delivering sort of 300 ecological and biodiversity projects nationwide. I mean, it's an extraordinary undertaking, isn't it?
It is, yeah, that's it. Well, that's again part of the success and the growth of the organisation. So not only the habitat works, but we also do a lot of protected species surveys as well. So like you say, we do badgers, bats, great crested newts, reptile surveys, all of those sorts of things. And yeah, that's not just within Warwickshire. We can undertake that sort of work all over the country. So we've grown from a small group of people just doing things within Warwickshire to, yes, a UK wide organisation now, which is fantastic. And like you say, again, we work with a private individual that wants to convert their loft space, and might have potentially bats in there, and we can go and do a bat survey, right through to national infrastructure projects, so things like the A14 development and things like that. We worked on that in terms of moving water bowls and looking for reptiles and trapping and translocating those so that the road could go through effectively.
Okay, so roads and rail, I mean, obviously HS2 is a big issue, so
Yeah.
Lots going on in Warwickshire. So let's just talk about Coventry and Warwickshire just for a moment. And what's the situation with regards to biodiversity in Coventry and Warwickshire?
Yes, I think from our point of view, it's fair to say that the trust is looking after, its nature reserve sites and trying to protect and manage the best of the habitats that they've got. But there's also a lot more that could be done, particularly, and that's why we're really interested in working with, like local businesses and people like that, because it's not just kind of the flagship nature reserve sites that need to be looked after and managed. It's all of those little parcels of land and those stepping stones between those big reservoirs of biodiversity that we need to look at as well. And what the Trust's promoting now is this kind of idea of living landscape. So yeah, all of these little interconnected parcels of green space and things like that to act as corridors and stepping stones for wildlife. And the more that you can boost the biodiversity value of those and make them attractive spaces for lots of different species to be able to live and move about in there.
And would you say that public interest increased in the last decade and awareness perhaps?
From our point of view, definitely. I mean, I think you only have to look at the membership numbers for things like the Wildlife Trust's nearly up to 1 million members. I mean, if you look at our kind of sister organisation, the RSPB, which deals entirely with the protection of birds, then they're well over 1 million members now as well. So you can see that's just two organisations that have a membership of over 1 million people each. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. There's lots of other nature conservation organisations and species specific organisations that have that. Generally, if you talk to people as well, we meet a lot of people out and about on site, and most people are quite interested in what we're doing and have quite they tend to like nature and appreciate wildlife and are interested in what we're doing. So yeah, I think there very much is, with most people that we've come across, a real interest and a passion to look after wildlife. I think that's why TV shows at the moment as well, you can look at things like Spring Watch and Autumn Watch, very, very popular, and have, a lot of viewing figures and keep being recommissioned year on year. And I think that's because, again, lots of people are interested in wildlife.
Local businesses listening to this then might want to jump on board, do their bit. What can they do? What simple steps?
I think it's, as I say, most people think that they can't really do anything because they just think, oh, well, it's not like a nature reserve site. It's not dedicated for conservation and things like that. But even doing something fairly simple, like just taking, the land that you've got and having a think about, whether you can plant native plants that are attractive to pollinators. So things that attract kind of insects like bees and butterflies. Again, we've seen quite a big decrease in pollinator species nationally and locally. You've probably seen the articles in the news and things like that. And again, just doing something small to help support those species, even if it's just a little bit of planting here and there, putting in some native wildlife attracting plant species that can make a big difference. There's things that you can help to support wildlife. I mean, again, the obvious ones are, you could put like an invertebrate box in, which is just kind of a small set of canes, which kind of solitary bees and things like that can nest in. It's again attractive to ladybirds and other sorts of things, and it just helps. And there's the standard things about putting kind of bat boxes up where you can, bird boxes and other things to help provide roosting spaces, to provide extra nesting spaces. If they've got possibly the opportunity, they could put in something like a pond, which is quite attractive as a feature. within the company boundary, but it also provides a fantastic wetland habitat to attract species like amphibians. It's great for invertebrates. It helps with aquatic macroinvertebrates. It attracts frogs, toads, newts, and all of those sorts of things as well.
For a business owner, are there any sort of considerations, any planning issues, or any pieces of legislation that folks need to be aware of?
Not so much from a planning point of view. If they've got a patch of land, they're pretty flexible in terms of the way that they can manage it, and as I say, we would actively encourage them to manage it as much as they can for nature conservation, whilst also balancing what they need, amenity wise from a business point of view as well. I think the only issue would be from a planning and legal point of view is if there were certain things that they attracted to the site, such as great crested newts or something like that within the pond, or if they had like birds nesting. Obviously, you can't disturb the nest while the birds are nesting and things like that. But generally, if these things are kind of tucked away in an area of non-operational land, that's just kind of an additional space that isn't going to be required for future development. And again, if you put your bird box up and it's out of the way and isn't really affecting anything, in terms of the day-to-day activities of the site, then they can coexist quite amicably without any sort of issue, for the companies. I think what we find is that the main issue in terms of kind of wilding sites and things like that is that people get a bit twitchy about it looking neat and tidy. Quite a lot of senior business managers like their grass to look like Wembley Stadium and have it all nice and neat and mown and everything like that, whereas obviously for wildlife you want to make it grow a bit longer, get some flowering plants in there and things like that. But it's, as I say, it's about taking little steps. So maybe, it's not the whole area that you want to dedicate to that and make it look like a meadow. You can have like a small parcel of land that's out of the way and still have a bit of amenity space. So it's about creating a balance, I think.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that the concept of no mow May is something that some people would have a hard time with. Other than the feel good fact, because quite clearly there's a nice thing about some of the things that you're talking about. From a business point of view, though, what's in it for them? Is there anything else other than just the feel good factor?
I think with wildlife and conservation, what a lot of companies tend to do nowadays, and what we've found and something that we've had to do ourselves, is that when you're tendering for contracts and things like that, the quality part of the submission, as well as kind of, the numbers, is actually quite important. And they're looking at, well, what systems have you got in place? Have you got an environmental management system? Have you got a health and safety management system, quality system, and things like that? If you have got some sort of environmental management system, then having something on your land holdings and trying to attract species through species features and things like that is actually a very visible demonstration of your environmental performance and your environmental credentials. And it's something that, you can sell as a bit of a success story as well. So if you do create a pond, or if you have put bird boxes up and, they've attracted species that are coming in and nesting, then that's a nice story both to the staff and also that you can promote something a bit more widely as well in terms of making it like a good newsletter and a good news story.
It's sort of broadening the social responsibility, into the environmental issues.
Yeah, very much so. And it's like you say, because a lot of people like, as we've discussed previously, wildlife and conservation and are quite interested. And when you get birds nesting and when you get like your frogs and toads, the frog spawn and toad spawn and things like that in the early months, it's quite a nice story to have, and it's something that people buy into quite readily when they see that. And as I say, it's more than anything else, more than kind of managing your waste and your water and all of those sorts of things. It's a very visible, emblematic demonstration of your environmental credentials, much more so than kind of hard numbers or anything like that.
So let's just talk about Middlemarch and your involvement with the Green Business Programme, because you've worked to sort of improve the energy efficiency of the business premises. So tell us a little bit more about that and the improvements that have been made.
Yeah, basically, we wanted to get our own house in order. Really, it's very good as preaching to people about, yes, you need to look after wildlife and nature conservation, but also, from our point of view, we wanted, or we have, ISO 14001 environmental management system, and as well as kind of doing the wildlife stuff, we need to get our own house in order in terms of managing our own waste and our energy consumption, water consumption, and things like that. And one of the opportunities that came along was, yes, to work with the Green Business Programme, basically, and have a free audit of our energy consumption within the building. So we're based kind of in a bit of a 1960s/70s office block, the edge of Coventry in Millicent's Wood.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of your colleagues called Bernadette helped us out massively by coming along, having a look at what we've got in terms of lighting and our heating, and the way that the water was being heated on site, and basically, the insulation in the buildings and the window and everything like that, and kind of worked out where we could enhance and tweak our performance to save energy, but also reduce our carbon footprint as well, which is really, it's important for us as a business. It's one of the indicators of our performance as a business, our carbon footprint. So, as I say, it was great that was provided as a free service, because it's free consultancy, which would have cost us a significant amount of money if we'd gone out to another company to ask them to come in to do that audit for us. The other great benefit of the scheme as well is that it had identified a number of grant opportunities that gave us, a significant proportion of the funding. So some of the improvements that they identified, like changing all of our old-fashioned strip lighting to LED lighting to reduce energy consumption, save carbon, and also changing we've got these old radiating convector heaters in the office, which, as I say, were probably put in when the building first created. Okay. And they're not very energy efficient at all, because they're a product of the 70s. And yeah, changing them over to new energy efficient heaters were two kind of massive savings that we could look, and something that we were looking at anyway, because the electricity bills were costing us a lot of money.
Can you give us some sort of a sense then? You're talking about carbon footprint and obviously being able to save money. Can you contextualize that a little bit? Can you give us some numbers?
Yes, I dug out the audit report. So basically, one of the opportunities that they identified was to replace all of the light fittings with LED alternatives. So the cost of that was about £6,500 to change all of the lighting over in the building.
Okay.
But you have to remember that through having the audit, they identified an opportunity to provide 40% funding for that through the grants that they got there, which again, is fantastic. Nearly half of it funded through grant applications. The cost saving of putting that in was £2,700 a year on our electricity. Yeah, indeed. So as you can see, it literally pays for itself within a couple of years.
I can understand why Bernadette from the Green Business Programme is your new best friend.
She is, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
great job.
She's my managing director's new best friend as well. Yeah,
great job, Bernadette.
They love everything that saves on the bottom line. So yeah, it's, as I say, we're into profit after 2 years, and it also saves us over 3.5 tons of carbon per year as well, which is a significant chunk of our carbon footprint. So as you say, our managing director's delighted. Our external auditors for ISO 14001, the environmental management system, are absolutely delighted as well. They think it's a great scheme, and they've credited us and the Green Business Scheme on that. So yeah, that's LRQA are a well-established auditor. So for them to say that's been a really good opportunity for improvement for us, and a really good scheme, it's a great endorsement of the scheme that you've got.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Right. So now, just to help our listeners that want to sort of embark upon a biodiversity type program, want to try and do their best for nature, in their properties around Coventry and Warwickshire. Let's go for the $1 million questions. Let's ask the man in the top seat here for what are your top tips? Three top tips. Can we do 3 top tips?
Yeah, of course we can. Yeah. So I think going back to what we said before about living landscapes and little stepping stones that help kind of nature move and, providing little habitats for nature. I think obviously a lot of people, both in businesses and personally, would have a land holding on their business. They'd have a garden area. So I think any opportunities that you can take to make your garden as wildlife friendly as possible, both your land holdings at work and also your personal garden at home. So yes, it might be putting up bird feeders or putting out insect boxes or bird boxes or a bat box or something like that. Maybe you can, as I say, create a little pond space or something. I think that it makes a fantastic difference to nature if they've got all of these little pockets that they can explore and utilize, and just helps that whole concept that the Wildlife Trust talking about in terms of living landscapes. It really helped to provide those, stepping stones and platforms, green spaces. I think the other thing that I would say as well that links into that, so kind of planting your plants, making it nice for pollinators, putting a pond in, is this idea of species features. So yeah, if you do have the opportunity, you can buy something quite cheaply in terms of a wooden bird box or a bat box or something like that, and it's just a case of kind of screwing it to your outside wall and they'll come along and find it and utilize it. Again, if you can put like an insect box in, it's quite cheap. It's only a wooden box with a set of canes in there, but again, ladybirds and lacewings can use it, solitary bees can use it, and it's great for pollinators. It gives them some additional space that they can utilize for their life cycles and things like that. So it's only kind of small, relatively cheap things, but it makes a massive difference to wildlife and provides them with all of those little niches that they need to utilize for their life cycle. It's really, really good. And then probably the last thing, as a wildlife trust person, I would say, if you are interested in nature conservation and making a difference, then please join your local wildlife trusts. So yeah, again, membership of the trust, it's a great thing. They'll produce newsletters and give you a lot more ideas and information about how you can help wildlife locally.
Thanks, James. It's lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much for sharing your story.
Absolute pleasure.
That was James Calow from Middlemarch Environmental. Please use the link in the description which accompanies this podcast and let us know if you're interested in accessing the Green Business Programme or becoming a member of the Green Business Network. The network allows businesses to come together, share ideas, promote energy, resource, waste and water efficiency, as well as engage on low carbon, environmental and green sustainability initiatives. The network is free to join and open to everyone. The Green Business Programme is part funded by the European Regional Development Fund and delivered by Coventry City Council, Coventry University and Coventry University Enterprises. This podcast was produced by Maria Covlea. I'm John Bates. Thanks for listening.